1 minute ago, Leonardo DiCaprio testified what I saw at Diddy's house was truly terrifying. Before the cameras could roll, before the tweets and the headlines and the flurry of speculation, there was only silence. A silence so thick you could feel it on your skin. Inside the tightly sealed federal courtroom, all eyes turned as the doors opened and Hollywood's most elusive star stepped through. Not for a red carpet, not for a premiere, but for something no script had ever prepared him for. Leonardo DiCaprio in a dark tailored suit and with a stiffness to his posture that betrayed weeks of tension approached the witness stand. The crowd didn't breathe. The judge, a woman with silver streaks in her tied-back hair, nodded once. "Mr. DiCaprio," she said, "please proceed." What followed was not performance. It was testimony, the kind that shatters careers, unmasks power, and breaks the unspoken codes of loyalty that bind Hollywood's elite. "I've attended strange parties," DiCaprio began, voice steady but distant. But this one was different. This one was designed. He looked directly at Sean Diddy Combs, the man who once threw the parties everyone whispered about, the man now accused of turning those parties into something else, something orchestrated, something dangerous. The courtroom didn't blink. It started with an invitation. A private estate, flown in guests, no media, no phones. DiCaprio admitted he was intrigued. Celebrities mingling, networking champagne, all the hallmarks of an A-list gathering. But as the evening dragged on, the sheen began to crack. "There were rooms we weren't allowed to enter," he said. People who looked too young. A tension in the air, like something unspoken held the place together. Then came the shift. A hallway, a cracked door, a glimpse. I saw cameras. I saw a room set up like a studio. People lined up, and Diddy was there giving orders. The gasps were audible. From that moment, Leo added, it stopped being a party. It became something else. Something industrial. Something cold. Diddy, seated across the room, remained stone-faced. His legal team scribbled furiously. The judge ordered a recess, but no one left their seats. When court resumed, DiCaprio returned with the weight of knowing this would be more than just testimony. It was an exorcism. "I didn't know if what I saw was illegal," he said, "but I knew it wasn't right." He described a young girl, couldn't have been more than 20, sitting on a red velvet couch surrounded by older men. She looked at me, just for a second. And in that second, I saw fear. His voice cracked. Then he steadied himself. "I left that night, but not before someone told me, 'Wrong floor, Mr. DiCaprio. You didn't see nothing.' That was just the beginning. There were the security guards with earpieces who, politely, redirected guests. There were celebrities who disappeared and reappeared looking hollow lost. There were the guests who were processed." "Processed," he repeated. "That's the word I heard whispered." He tried to leave. He was told his driver was delayed. Instead, he was escorted to a lounge with no phone signal, soft jazz playing, and a bartender who never spoke. He waited. For over an hour. It felt like a warning, he said. A velvet threat. Eventually a car arrived. He left. And for years he told no one. So why now? The prosecutor asked the question directly. "Because no one's too big to fall?" DiCaprio replied. "Not even him." He pointed again to Diddy, who remained motionless, a mask of composure, barely hiding the rage beneath. It was around this point that Leonardo revealed something darker. Something that would change the tone of the trial forever. "There was a list," he said. The gallery stirred. "A fellow actor told me days after the party. He said, 'You were lucky you left early. There's a list of everyone who's ever been compromised inside that house.'" He paused. That's how they traded favors. Not with money. With silence. DiCaprio's expression hardened. I started noticing things. Directors avoiding me. Projects vanishing. People from the party at award shows giving me the same look. He looked at the jury, like we'd all been marked. A blueprint of the mansion was mentioned next. Secret rooms, surveillance hubs, control centers hidden behind mirrored panels. It wasn't just about excess, Leo said. It was about control. They wanted to see how far people would go when they thought no one was watching. And then he stopped. Because he remembered the girl? She was in the basement, he said, the room freezing in place. I was looking for a bathroom. I opened a door, started down a staircase. I heard crying. She was young, alone, sitting on the floor behind a tinted glass panel. I asked if she was okay. She looked up, panicked, shook her head. Then a man appeared, grabbed the door, slammed it shut. Wrong floor, Mr. DiCaprio. You didn't see nothing. He repeated the words as if tasting them for the first time again. And then, for the first time all morning, Leonardo DiCaprio looked broken. I tried to report it. No one would listen. The courtroom was silent. The judge called another break, and, when we returned the file, a sealed manila envelope, the one Leo never meant to have, and the one that could tear an empire apart. When court resumed, the tone had shifted. Not just in the room, but in the people. Something had cracked open. The press didn't dare move. The jury barely blinked. And DiCaprio, now visibly more resolved, looked at the sealed manila envelope being handed to the prosecution like it was radioactive. Is that the file? He asked, voice low. The prosecutor nodded. And just like that, the room's energy changed again. DiCaprio leaned forward. I wasn't supposed to have it, he said, but I kept it. Because someone needed to. The file had come to him in 2019. A former assistant to a major record executive had delivered it in person, hands trembling. She said, if I disappear, give this to someone who can't be silenced. I asked her, why me? She said, because you still have a soul. Inside were screenshots, logs, testimony fragments, names, faces, transcripts of conversations, security footage timestamps, flight records, hotel check-ins. Most damning of all, names of underage individuals seen entering Diddy's estate and never appearing in public again. I never opened it in full, Leo admitted. It scared me. But I scanned enough to know it was real. And then he said her name, not aloud, not in court. He called her Hope. Hope wasn't a theory. She was real. A survivor. Her messages collected in that envelope described months of being trafficked through an inner circle, the same one Leonardo had glimpsed for a single night. She'd escaped only because, as she put it, someone guilty grew a conscience. One quote from her handwritten was read aloud in court by DiCaprio. If anyone ever finds out what he did to us, they'll bury him. But they'll bury us too. I just want someone to say it out loud, even if no one believes it. He looked up. That's why I'm here. The defense team objected. Loudly. Relevance. Hearsay. Inflammatory. But the judge had already seen the look in the jury's eyes. The file was marked for admission. The courtroom buzzed, not with whispers, but the kind of collective breath-holding that comes when people sense history shifting under their feet. Diddy, once smug, now sat pale and rigid. He whispered to his lawyer, but even that seemed performative. This wasn't a story anymore. It was a reckoning. Then the questions turned pointed. Mr. DiCaprio, did you ever see Diddy interact with any political figures at these events? He paused, considered the gravity. Yes, he said. Barack Obama. The room imploded metaphorically, of course. Gasps rippled. Reporters nearly dropped their devices. Leonardo clarified. I never saw him at the mansion, he said, but I saw them together. Fundraisers, after-parties, private events. Once I saw Diddy hand something in envelope to someone in Obama's circle. I don't know what it was. Then he said the thing no one wanted to hear. It's hard to believe someone that powerful didn't at least hear the whispers. Whispers. That's what this all had been built on. The lighthouse. The name used only in hushed tones. Leo had heard it once at a fundraiser. "You've been to the lighthouse," someone told him. "You know what it means now?" He hadn't answered, but he remembered. They called it that, Leo said, because from inside it, you could see everything, and once you'd seen it, you couldn't unsee it. The term chilled the room, but what came next chilled the soul. The prosecutor's voice grew quieter, firmer. "Mr. DiCaprio, did you ever interact with someone you believed was being held against their will?" Silence. Then Leo nodded. "I was looking for a bathroom. I wandered into a hallway, went down a staircase, heard crying." The jury leaned forward. There was a girl, 17 maybe, in a room with a glass panel. She looked up at me, panicked. I opened the door. She shook her head. Then a man appeared, slapped the door shut, and then came the words that echoed through the courtroom like a shot. "Wrong floor, Mr. DiCaprio. You didn't see nothing? Go back upstairs." He did, but he never forgot. "I tried to report it," he said. "Nobody would touch it. Not my agent, not the studios, not the press." He started having nightmares, stopped showing up to premieres, avoided public events for nearly a year, and through it all, no answers. No name for the girl, no trace. It was like she'd been erased. "That's when I knew," he said. "Someone had the power to make people disappear." And that brings us back to the list. The list. Not just a metaphor. A real document, according to Leo. With names, faces, evidence of compromise. Insurance for Diddy. Collateral? Control. And that's when the prosecution asked the next devastating question. Do you believe Diddy knew about the basement? Leo didn't hesitate. It wasn't just his house. It was his design. The gallery froze. Even the defense went still. This wasn't just a mansion. It was a machine. And the man at its center, the one still dressed in designer suits, still claiming innocence, no longer looked powerful. He looked exposed. There are names that fade into the background of history. And then there are names that anchor it. Moments, codes, fragments of whispered truth that won't vanish no matter how many lawyers try to bury them. The lighthouse was one of those names. A code word, a specter. A shibboleth passed through clenched teeth at galas, whispered between executives, muttered behind closed doors. But, on the stand for the first time, it was said out loud. The lighthouse Leonardo DiCaprio repeated slowly, deliberately. Everyone who'd been there knew. He remembered the first time he heard it. It wasn't at the party. It was weeks later at a private film industry dinner. A music executive clinked glasses with him and leaned in. "You've been to the lighthouse, huh?" he said, smiling. "You know what it means now." Leo didn't answer. He didn't need to, because after that night, he started seeing it everywhere. The coded glances, the quiet acknowledgments, the parties that weren't about music or movies. They were about access, about leverage, about secrets kept. It wasn't a nickname, DiCaprio explained. It was a design, a metaphor. A place where everything was recorded, but nothing was remembered. Inside that mansion, according to testimony, the rooms had names. The gallery where influencers were paraded like art. The observatory, a mezzanine above the main lounge, wired with discreet cameras. The cellar unofficial, inaccessible, except by coded invitation or mistake. And then there was the mirror room. "I never saw that one myself," Leo admitted, "but I heard about it. A place where every surface reflected and every conversation was captured. The power wasn't just in the parties, it was in the silence after. The knowing glances across red carpets, the careers that bloomed and the ones that vanished." When DiCaprio tried to distance himself, he was met with resistance so subtle it was suffocating. "A project I was attached to fell apart. Another studio deal went cold. Calls weren't returned. It was like I'd triggered an algorithm of avoidance, and yet there was no memo, no blacklist, just silence. And that silence was the loudest thing in the room. Then came the night he knew he'd have to speak out someday. Capri, 2021. A yacht, a quiet evening, familiar faces. Someone mentioned the lighthouse again. Offhand? As a joke? It's back. He's starting again. DiCaprio left the table, walked to the edge of the deck, looked out at the water, and for the first time he thought about jumping. I had spent years pretending nothing happened, smiling for cameras, thanking award shows. Meanwhile, I knew. I knew that somewhere someone was still locked in a room, because I said nothing. He didn't jump, but something shifted. That night, he made a vow. If the day ever came that this man had to face justice, I'd tell the truth, no matter what it cost me. The courtroom leaned in as he said it, as if the air itself wanted to absorb it. DiCaprio was no longer testifying. He was delivering something closer to confession, but not of guilt, of grief, of complicity through silence, and now of refusal to stay silent any longer. Then the prosecution placed something on the table, a still image, grainy but clear. It was from inside the mirror room. The reflection showed two people, one seated, young, frightened, the other standing, facing the mirror. Diddy. Leo's breath caught when he saw it. That's the room, he whispered. That's what I felt that night. Like there were 1,000 eyes. And only one voice giving orders? The defense scrambled. Objections flew. The judge overruled them with a single motion. And then came the blow that no one expected. Mr. DiCaprio, the prosecutor said, quiet but sharp. Did you ever receive a threat related to your silence? He didn't blink. Yes. A pause. In 2020, I got a call. Unlisted number. A voice said, you saw more than you should have. Let it die, Leo. Did you recognize the voice? No, but I recognized the fear. That fear had followed him, not in shadows, but in whispers. Studio heads telling him to let the past stay buried. One even asked him, you want to be in The Revenant 2 or in court? He didn't laugh, because it wasn't a joke. The courtroom sat frozen, and just when it seemed the day had reached its peak, the prosecutor asked the question that reset everything. Why do you think no one else has come forward? Leo looked at the jury, then looked at Diddy. Because power protects itself, because shame is a stronger prison than walls, and because, for a long time, silence felt safer than truth. He looked back at the prosecutor, but not anymore. As the judge announced another recess, no one moved. Reporters weren't typing, jurors weren't blinking, and Diddy, he wasn't smiling. For the first time since this trial began, he looked small. The lighthouse had been exposed, but the storm wasn't over. Because what came next wasn't about Leonardo. It was about what he handed over and who else was on the list. It came in a slim black binder. Not a dramatic stack of files or overflowing box, just one carefully organized, unnervingly silent binder placed gently on the prosecution's table. The label on its front was handwritten Simple Access Tier 3. No one breathed when it was opened. Leonardo DiCaprio sat straight, his hands still clasped. He didn't glance down. He already knew what was in it. This, the prosecutor said, is what was recovered from the envelope, the file he was never meant to have, and within it, a list of individuals flagged, filmed, and according to whistleblower testimony, held in strategic leverage by Mr. Combs and his associates. The word they didn't use, but everyone was thinking was blackmail. The first page was a chart. No names, just roles, actor, director, senator, producer, CEO. Beside each entry, timestamps, locations. File codes, then came the redacted emails. Keep her in Gallery 2. She plays well on wide angles. Footage secured. Executives in town through Tuesday hold until Friday drop, and then the quotes in text message form. He asked too many questions. Find something on him. We'll get him back to the lighthouse. Then he'll listen. The jury looked sick. Even the judge paused longer than usual between questions, scanning every document with an intensity bordering on disbelief. When asked to explain the structure, DiCaprio offered it plainly. It was a system, a pyramid. The parties weren't parties, they were tests. See how far people would go, get it on film, use it later. And this list, the prosecutor asked, is a record of that. He nodded. It's the control grid. Some people were there voluntarily, others were set up, but everyone on it was useful. The prosecution began to read sample names aloud, only those cleared by the court. A mid-tier talent agent, a well-known fashion brand executive, a tech CEO who had since gone mysteriously quiet. But when they reached the fifth name, the judge raised a hand. That's enough. The point had been made. The courtroom had changed. The tension wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about the ripple who else would fall. Who else was tied into this knowingly or not. Because the lighthouse didn't just trap its victims, it bound its guests. And then another bombshell. One document included a set of initials crossed out, rewritten, then tagged, "Remove public risk." The initials LD. Leo took a breath. "I was on that list," he said. There was a quiet gasp across the room. I was flagged as compromised, but I wasn't. I hadn't done anything. That's when I realized they were planning to fabricate leverage. That's when I got scared. He paused. They didn't just record what people did. They were willing to manufacture it if they needed to. Then came the footage. The prosecution had acquired through a leak confirmed by chain of custody surveillance video from one of the parties. No faces shown, only shadows. One camera angle from the ceiling of a narrow hallway showed a figure being guided toward a room. The voice in the background unmistakable, calm, commanding. Tell him to smile. Remind him this is what keeps the deals flowing. A pause, and if he asks questions, ask if he wants to work again. Diddy's face remained impassive, until the next question. Mr. DiCaprio, the prosecutor, said, "Do you believe anyone was ever harmed as a result of being on this list?" A long silence. Then yes. "How do you know?" Leo's voice was sharp now. "Clean. Because one of them reached out to me. And 2 months later, she was gone. No explanation. No trace. I hired a private investigator. No passport use. No phone activity. It was like she never existed." There were now members of the press openly crying. The gallery, mostly staff, legal observers, court sketch artists looked gutted. But the defense stood up. They had to. It was their turn. Diddy's lead counsel, a man known for turning cases around with charm and misdirection, stepped forward. "Mr. DiCaprio," he said with a rehearsed smile, "you're a well-known actor. Could it be, just possibly, that your imagination has blurred into your memory?" Leo didn't flinch. "You can call it a script," he said, "but I didn't write it." He did. And then he pointed directly at Diddy. The defense tried to push further. "Why didn't you come forward earlier? I was scared." Of Diddy. No, Leo said, leaning in. Of everyone who let him do it. For decades. The judge announced a short break. And as the jury filed out, reporters ran, not walked from the room, to file what was already being called the biggest entertainment industry trial of the century. But in the courtroom, Leonardo sat still, staring straight ahead. He wasn't finished. Not yet. The file had one last page, a handwritten note unsigned. Only 2 sentences. "You've seen the shadows. Thank you for staying in the light." DiCaprio closed his eyes, and then whispered, "I'm trying."